If a person you know, a friend or a relative, dies of cancer, how would you talk about him? That he lost his battle with cancer, or that he braved it till the last second? Would you perceive it as a defeat or a fight? Was he a hero who survived it, or a victim who couldn't endure it? Now imagine that you have to talk about a woman who was raped, or a child who was murdered, or a person charged with blasphemy. What would be your choice of words? How would you talk about that person? Would you reveal the image, or would you conceal it? Would you blur the image? Would you talk about what the woman was wearing, or would you let it be? Now, these and many more are questions that media in Pakistan still struggles with. We've seen a boom in media after 2000 with the likes of Jio, Express, AR by Aaj, and the list goes on. And in my opinion, with its viewership and reach, media does alter and shape public opinion. But how? The language used, the questions posed, the tone of questioning, the guests you call on your show, every image shown, every protest covered, every protest not covered, everything you see adds to the influence that media has, good or bad. Now, in 2015, there was a case of supermodel Ayan Ali, and we all remember. She was caught for money laundering while leaving a Pakistani airport for Dubai. It was about $500,000. Now, this was a very important case of money laundering, and a lot could be discussed on media, corruption, loopholes in law. But what the media decided to do was, it really turned it into a circus while playing raunchy Bollywood music during court proceedings. Every time she would go to court, what she was wearing would be discussed. It actually became a complete joke. And this wasn't even an example of good journalism versus bad journalism. This was complete trash, and it was actually embarrassing. Now, you would remember, just in July, when former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was coming with his daughter Maryam Nawaz, his brother Shahbaz Sharif tried to receive him in a cavalcade at the airport. Now, there was no live, continuous coverage of this event. And on social media, images were shown of the number of people who went to visit him. It is still contested whether there was a tsunami of people to try and receive the former Prime Minister, or whether the party couldn't even galvanize enough supporters. Now, that is still contested because media showed images of zoomed-in images in streets where you could show 200 people and zoom it in and make it seem like the entire street is full of people. Or you could zoom out and give an aerial view and actually show that most of it is empty and there are just a few people around. That is the power of visuals that media gets to play with. Now, I remember in 2009, I was working in Lahore in a newsroom. And there was a case of a 3-year-old girl, of a 3-year-old child, Iman Malik. She got a minor burn on her hand while playing with her cousins. And her parents took her to a private hospital in Lahore, where she was wrongfully injected and died as a result. And I remember that when she died because of a doctor's negligence, there was a media frenzy around this case. Every political show at that time turned into the 8 p.m. slot, 10 p.m. slot. They weren't discussing politics. They were discussing the death of this girl and whether the hospital would be held responsible, whether the doctor would. And in my opinion, if media hadn't obsessively covered this story, this death for weeks, for months, given follow-up news, there was a probe set up by the Punjab government. The Supreme Court also took notice. And I truly believe it was because of media's frenzy around this case. And this actually shows the importance of follow-up news, when you don't just throw a teaser or tell what happened, but then you do a follow-up 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later of what really happened. In 2010, I remember there was a blast at the shrine of Data Darbar in Lahore. And I decided, it gave a number of about 35 people died, but 175 who were injured. And my team and I decided to go and cover those injured and see what that means. When you really hear 40 injured, 50 injured, they're not just injured, they lose their eyesight, they lose limbs, they're handicapped for life. So we followed this 27-year-old man, Qasim, who lost his vision. The Punjab government at that time announced that they're going to give compensation, financial compensation to people. He had a problem that could only be fixed in a hospital in Singapore. Now, we followed this case for a few weeks. Until those weeks, no money had been given to the family. They had been promised. But then eventually, we were moved on to other assignments too, and we still don't know whether Qasim was able to go to Singapore and get treated or not. And that's why follow-up news is really important. Now, censorship of any sort is not a good thing at all. And freedom of speech is, of course, imperative. But sometimes practicing a little bit of restraint by media is actually a good thing. Now, a recent example of that would be Asia Bibi's case, a Christian woman who was later acquitted by the Supreme Court of Pakistan. Now, when this judgment came, a small segment of the society was out on the streets, protesting, burning tires, harming anyone and anything that came in their way. There was a complete media blackout on this case, and Pembra asked media not to show the protest. Now, this was not to stifle public opinion or to control media, but this was to avoid unnecessary panic and unrest that would be caused in the country by actually covering the protests, because that was just a small segment of people in very few pockets of the country. But when you're sitting in your living room and watching television, it seems as though that is all that is happening in the country. And also a decision like that requires a judgment call. It requires this vision and to be able to see the repercussions of showing something or not showing something. Now, talking about judgment call, the question is, who is making that judgment call? I'd like you to take a look at this slide. These are some of the channels in Pakistan right now, and there are a lot more, of course: Dunya, ARY, Express, Geo, Aaj, Kohinoor, Royal. All these channels have one thing in common, and that's men. Men are controlling all the news in media right now. The control of news, the decision-making, the narrative is decided by men. The top slots are actually with them. Now, what does that mean? To me, that means that anytime news is reported on the following: rape, gang rape, acid attack, honor killing, domestic abuse, any news on violence against women, the decision makers are men. Now, even if you watch political talk shows, you have panels of men. So those are really just manels, and they're not really explaining, but mansplaining. And that is a problem, because that means it's like decisions, crucial decisions of race in America are made by white men only. Now, another reason for that is because we have completely untrained professionals in media working right now, either through college education or through on-the-job training in media. Now, of course, women representation is not the only problem that we have in media. As I mentioned, on-the-job training is a big problem. But actually, that's really not a big problem, because right now, only one issue dominates, and that is politics. Really, what happened to issues of climate change, of water sanitation, planting more trees, sending girls to school? That's not even shown on television anymore, because media is showing people what it thinks what people want to see, and not what civil societies should be shown, just like the issues that I just mentioned. See, what's happening right now is that anybody who can write is given spaces in a newspaper to become a column writer or an opinion maker. Anybody who knows how to use a camera is sent on the field to make a video, to make a package of a rape victim. And you've often seen cameramen shoving mics in people's faces and asking them about their ordeal. The point is not to write, but to write effectively. The point is not to give a viewpoint, but to give an informed viewpoint. the point is not to give information, but to provide useful information. What Ayan Ali was wearing in the courtroom is information, but it's not useful information. And it's really now time that media breaks out of its circle in Pakistan of ratings, of viewerships, and of selling news. Because as media professionals, I truly believe that as custodians of information, we provide people the narrative of the national narrative. We give them a direction. We literally make people think. And this job should be entrusted on people who are actually trained to think that way and trained to make the right judgment call. Thank you.